Hey, good morning. What is up? This is the Leafs Convo for Oak Ridge Ford in London, Ontario, oakridgeford.com. That's where you're going to get your next vehicle. We're into February. Programs on outgoing 2024 models are insane. You have to reach me. Thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars off your next vehicle at Norman Oak Ridge Ford. And hey, you know what? The programs on 2025s, especially F-150, Bronco Sport, and Escape, are really great. I'm the guy you're going to get your next vehicle with. Converts are reaching out to me every single day for me to help them with their automotive needs. And that's what I do. This is the Convo for February 2nd, 2025. Norm in London, Mike in Buffalo. The Leafs finishing off a low-key shitty month of January, going 7-6, and then starting February by getting a win by the skin of their teeth in Edmonton last night, a 4-3 decision. That called back goal because of the offside, really helping the Leafs solidify the 2 points, along with Joseph Wall playing all world and the guys like Tavares and Nyes coming back after injury to chip in. Mitch Marner with 2 points, Bobby McMahon with a goal. You know, the thing about it is the optics can tell you one thing and then the reality will set in, and then you can kind of dive into the entirety of where the Leafs are, and it's not as good as you might think. Mr. Augello, I know you're the resident curmudgeon, usually coming up with the reasons why things aren't as great. Am I overstating that things could be a lot better here, Mr. Augello? Good morning.
Good morning. Well, I mean, honestly, when you read off the record in January, I thought that's pretty good for what they've gone through with, one of their two goalies out, with their, first or second line center, depending on what type of lineup, one of their top two centers being out in Tavares, Matthew Nyes, who'd been one of the hottest players on the team, out. Mm-hmm. They're playing Ryan Reeves and kids like Jacob Quillen in the lineup, who I don't think is ready right now to play in the NHL. They have not had the luxury of having a complete lineup, and then they have it for one day, and then Oliver Ekman-Larsson gets hurt. So, I mean, now that every team is like that, every team has injuries, and the job of these teams is to overcome them. Last night was a good step in the right direction. I suspected like they were going to work themselves up into a lather to play Edmonton. They beat Edmonton in Toronto earlier in the year, and they get up 3-0, good first period, and then the Leafs do what the Leafs do. It's like they cannot rest, they cannot sit back. They're just not, even when they're a better defensive team, they're not a good enough defensive team. They're not the 95 Devils. They cannot sit back and just shut teams down. And especially if it's Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. And, they almost allowed Edmonton to come back from the dreaded 4-1 lead. The MVP of the team is Jordan Bean, who's the video coordinator for the Leafs, who spotted the offside that prevented the tying goal. Mm-hmm. And Joseph Wall, I mean, everybody knows who's watched this show. I'm a Joseph Wall believer. I think he got top-end ability. The ability that we're questioning is the availability. He's been available, especially through the injury to Stolarz. Stolarz is on the ice. He probably comes back either before the Four Nations or just after. But right now, Wall made a bunch of unbelievable saves. He made the save at the end of the game, which I'm not sure if it got by him would have counted because time was elapsing. But he made a save similar to that in the first period. He won that game for them, but they cannot get far in this season, in the playoffs, if they have to rely on their goaltending to make 45 saves. So they got to be a better defensive team.
This is the Leafs Convo for Oak Ridge Ford, oakridgeford.com. Norm in London, Mike in Buffalo. Like the content, subscribe to the channel. Thanks for being with us on this fine February morning. When things get frenetic for the Maple Leafs, it gets hectic, and I get nervous. Joseph Wall is there to hopefully calm things down with steady play. Let's take into account that the Oilers, who really are a rival of the Maple Leafs, if these two teams played 5-6 times a year, it would be pretty wild. But the Oilers are coming off a Stanley Cup final in which they nearly pulled off the impossible, a 3-0 series comeback. So they know how to come back. They know how to fight back. And of course, it's the Hymans who's got an axe to grind. It's the Perrys who's been around forever. So, you know, within itself, it's a success for the Maple Leafs. Sure, they gave the game back a little bit and had to hang on. But Wall withstood the barrage, and against a team that is a potential cup contender, they somehow pulled it off, starting February the right way, out west, as they embark on a 4-game Western swing. So I guess you take your 2 points and you keep moving on.
Well, I mean, there were signs there last night, I think, that were positive. I have to give, like, Nick Robertson is normally not a really an abrasive type player, but he was getting in the kitchen of a couple players. He pissed off Evan Bouchard. He was throwing what weight he has around, which I was impressed with. And in the third period, I think he blocked a shot because he hobbled to the Leafs bench and went to the locker room and then came back. So I give, like, even though he didn't put a puck in the net, I thought Robertson was strong. Matthew Nyes, I wish that Brad Treliving would get him signed because he's going to end up scoring 30 goals. And I think the price on him on a new contract is just going to go up. But it was a spotty effort, but it was a good enough effort to beat the Oilers, who are a flawed team. It's like, geez, how many more ex-Leafs can they have on that team? John Klingberg, Connor Brown, Kasperi Kapanen, Zach Hyman. It's like I'm waiting for them. I'm waiting for Bob McGill to make a comeback and play with the Oilers. It's absolutely ridiculous. And to the point, like, I was for, if John Klingberg was going to sign a veteran minimum deal, I would have been all for the Leafs signing him. I'm not saying that, he would have been, he's going to be what he was last night, but Nylander walked around him twice. But when John Klingberg was healthy in Dallas, players walked around him. He's not a good defensive defenseman. He's a power play
string bean, Mike.
He's a skater. He's a power play quarterback. He's an offensive defenseman. The question is whether he can still skate. And if he can skate, then it was a good signing for the Oilers. But I would have been in favor of the Leafs signing him. But I think you look at that game and you look at their sort of gaps in the Leafs lineup, and you look at the landscape of what just happened over the last few days with the Rantanen deal and the deal between Calgary and Philadelphia and the JT Miller, all these deals going down, and people are starting to say, okay, Brad, it's time for you to make your move.
So the win last night, spiritually, what does that do for the Maple Leafs? You mentioned that Nick Robertson punching above his weight, playing physical. We'd have to see that every night from him to be able to tag him as a guy who's evolving into more than just a speedy dude who can put the puck in the net from time to time. But spiritually, what does this do for a team that really has to get its mindset the right way, if not add more grit and determination before the deadline as it progresses towards the end of the season, potentially winning a division and getting set for the playoffs? And we all know what happens there. Your speed and your skill are just one or two components of what you need to complete the mosaic to become a champion.
Well, I think the one thing that you could see after the game, that if there was any doubt in the confidence that this team has in Joseph Woll, I think that was sort of wiped away after that performance last night.
Are you ginning up this doubt and conflict? I haven't seen anything to give us any indication that Craig Berube doesn't trust Joseph Woll.
I don't think it's Berube. I think, and I'm just saying, like, the doubt regarding Woll is not his talent; it's his health. And like last night, he was stretching around like a string bean. He was like Gumby. I mean, he made some saves that were just incredible. But the thing is, like, you also have to play in control and not stretch yourself out in a way that you injure yourself. So, I mean, he needed to make the big save. He did make the big save, and the reaction of the team after the game was just like, you're the man. And I mean, I'm not saying he's going to be like the dominant number one starter playing all the games like Connor Hellebuck does in Winnipeg. When Stolarz comes back, Stolarz is going to play a healthy amount of games. But in my mind, when the playoffs start, game one in the playoffs is going to be Joseph Wall.
Right. You know, I've never felt like goaltending was a problem for this team this year. You know, having 4 guys that you can go to, 3 right now with a 4th coming back. I really do believe the goaltending is fine, especially in this moment where the leash is being lengthened on Wall to give him the opportunity to prove to the world he's got number 1 capabilities, his health notwithstanding. Look, if he's going to have to put up 45 saves against a team like the Oilers, he is going to be flailing around. It might look ugly, but in the event that you find yourself under siege and your goalie is the last line of defense who ultimately earns you the win, that is a massive boost for him spiritually. And that's the thing, Mike. How does this team rise spiritually beyond what it is capable of doing technically to prepare itself for what's to come in the playoffs? We're getting closer every single day to that moment of reckoning. We all know this. It's all about the playoffs. It is all about the playoffs. Go and get all the buddy points you want and have all these individual accolades heaped at your feet. When we get to April and the clock starts ticking, what do you represent?
Yeah, and you know me, I love trades. I love the deadline. I mean, I'll just bore you with a quick little story. It's like when I was like not even a teenager, when I was like 11 or 12, I was playing Stratomatic hockey, and I was like really into the being in Buffalo, we were lucky. We got the Boston station, so I could watch the Bruins. We got
wood panel basement walls.
There you go, exactly. We got the Rangers games off of MSG. We got the Leafs games on Hockey Night in Canada and CHCH out of Hamilton, the Sabres game. So I was immersed in it. And I loved the deadline because the deadline was exciting. It was like, hey, I'll trade you this for that. I would call Sports Phone, which was back then, this is 1979, 1980, and Sports Phone was located in New York City. So I'm calling it every 10 minutes on the deadline day because they would update and give the trades because you wouldn't get it anywhere. You couldn't get it on the radio. There was no internet. So it was like, I'm trying to find out the trades as quickly as possible. And the next month, my parents get a like $110.
Oh,
this
no.
This is in 1980 because the phone call was like 89 cents a minute and then like 50 cents the next minute. And each call was 2 or 3 minutes. And I was calling like 50 times and they thought this, I'm like, yeah, I was calling sports. I didn't realize it. So, that's how nuts I was about the deadline. And the deadline is important.
Right.
And the thing is, now with this, you see the deals that were made. Philadelphia sold Joel Farabee and Morgan Frost to Calgary. They're sellers. They may sell guys like Rasmus Ristolainen, who might be on the Leafs radar if they want to add a right shot defenseman, but he's pricey. Mm-hmm. But their main focus is going to be center. You've already seen Michael Granlund get traded. You already seen Morgan Frost get traded. JT Miller, I don't think was realistic. He got traded. So the names are clicking off the board. And for the target that everybody thought the Leafs were looking at, Yanni Gourde, he just had sports hernia surgery. He's going to be out 5 to 7 weeks, which would be out past the deadline. So if that's the case, I still think they would take a shot on him if they're interested in him. But you might get him for a much lower cost, but it's risky because somebody's coming back from an injury and he probably won't come back to mid to late March. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that's, there's not a perfect fit out there unless, we don't know who they're looking at, but I still think they need a third line center. I don't think they can go into the playoffs with Max Domi as their third line center. It just doesn't work.
Robert Bury, Mike, this is for you. Do you really think all the gossip that Brad will make these trades to get the players they need is really going to happen? You know what he's trying to say. And that's the big question. With all of these guys off the board now, Frost is gone, Miller is gone, Granlund's gone. Who's left? I mean, who's left? And like, again, you may want somebody, but is it plausible? Is it possible to make these trades and make it all make sense in the end?
Well, I mean, if you look at the teams that are non-playoff teams, like Philadelphia, I think basically said we're out. But from what I've been told, they're not going to trade Scott Lawton because they already traded a center, and that was one name that was out there. I thought the Leafs had a chance at signing Brandon Saad. If Brandon Saad was a center, I think they would have signed him, but he ended up signing with Vegas. That's the thing. It's like, it may be so, like the name that popped up last week from Elliot Friedman, and I think it's not a bad move, is Luke Cunnan from San Jose. But the problem is Luke Cunnan's not a third line center. He's probably, he's a bottom six guy. Maybe he could fit into that role. But I think they're looking for somebody a little more offensive and somebody more two-way, and I don't know if Cunnan can really do that. I also think they need to maybe consider adding a right shot defenseman, but that's easier said than done. We've been down that road so many times. But it can't be somebody who's going to fit on the bottom pairing. They have enough bottom pairing right shot defensemen. They have Connor Timmins. They have Philippe Myers. They have Simone Benoit, who's a lefty. Yanni Hakanpää, he's not going to the Four Nations. I don't know if he'll ever play again. So, I don't even consider him sort of on the radar. So
leave him out.
Yeah. So right now, you basically, I think you've got some question marks, and that's what Brad Treliving is going to have to address before March the 7th.
OG's Converts, what say you? Like the content, subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for being here. It means a lot. Does Brad Treliving end up making a deal for the sake of making a deal? Or
No.
Do you believe we get to the point where he just can't do anything of substance that would help this team in the interim without punishing it in the long term? Just having to throw his hands up and say, the boys we have are the guys who are either going to get it done or not.
I think they're going to make a deal. In terms of how consequential it will be, I don't know. But there are areas they need to address, and I think he'll try to address them. Mm-hmm. He may get creative. We're going to probably see. If Hakanpää, he's already on LTIR. I think you could see Ryan Reeves get waived down to the Marlies to open up his cap space. You always have injuries, so then once that happens, if they need somebody to come up, nobody's going to claim Ryan Reeves.
Right.
They could move some pieces around the chessboard. One thing is with the issue of them scoring goals. The people out there said, "Oh, they should trade Nick Robertson." He does not. Nick Robertson scores goals. Nick Robertson on a third line, he's probably going to end up scoring 15 goals. That's tough to get. So
but if there's a piece that you can get back that would fill a more glaring need hole, it's not as if losing Nick Robertson hurts you dramatically on the offensive end of things. There is somebody else who can pick up the slack.
No, and if Calle Yarncroke is back healthy, then you could plug him in on the third line, and that would be an improvement. But what I'm saying is this: you don't trade Nick Robertson for a guy who's a rental, because Nick Robertson is somebody who could stay around for 4 or 5 years. If you get somebody who's got term left, if you get somebody who can help you not just this year but in the future years, somebody who's young. Because I'm telling you right now, they trade Nick Robertson. Nick Robertson's going to go someplace.
You know that.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is what Brad Treliving and any general manager, in a position to make a deal or not, has to grapple with, right? It's the immediate gratification at the expense of long-term pain, and watching somebody that you've invested in do quite well for another organization just because you were trying to augment a team that still has a hope in hell of winning a Stanley Cup, but you have to do it anyway. Jason Sparks, if they trade Easton Cowan or Fraser Minton, I'm done with this team.
No.
Help top players that can't score in the playoffs. Wendell Clark and Doug Gilmour didn't need help. He's saying the same thing that you're saying, but we're talking about larger targets here. Right? Would you mortgage the future for the potential of making your team better, and you don't even know that who you bring back is going to make things better, although you have already projected that these guys in your system will at some point pay dividends? Are the Leafs even that close? As much as there's the pressure on this team to do something in the playoffs, do we feel like they're that close that making a deal and swinging a prospect back for somebody who can help you potentially go on a cup run would be worth it.
In my mind, Fraser Minten and Easton Cowan are untradeable or untouchable.
Right.
You don't trade them. I mean, Minten, he's playing okay, and with the Marlies, he's played okay. I don't think he's a top. I mean,
Patrick Mafia thinks that he's overrated.
I don't think he's a top 6 center, but I think he's got ability. I think he's smart. I think he probably projects as a third line center. Those are valuable. He's a kid. He's under $1 million on the salary cap. Easton Cowan is having a good year in junior. He probably plays with the Marlies or makes the Leafs next year, depending on whether he makes the camp, makes the team out of training camp, or if Mitch Marner is around, because that could affect Cowan's
right.
spot on the roster. But you don't trade those players unless you're getting somebody who's an impact player, unless it's somebody who's an impact player who plays for you for multiple years. What you do, the prospects that you give up in a trade for a rental, maybe a good prospect like a Topi Niemelä, but clearly the organization likes bigger defensemen, and Topi Niemelä is not a bigger defenseman. So you use that asset to get something that helps you. Those are the players that you move, not the Easton Cowans and not the Fraser Mittens.
Wondering how innovative and creative Brad Treliving can be. Perhaps he's seeing a deal that could work that none of us have detected to be a possibility. And I mean, that's exciting. Is it not? John Tavares back last night. Matthew Knies back last night. I mean, I wouldn't say in the nick of time, but it's you want to get your guys on board and get them humming again. You just kind of jump into the lineup as if nothing really affected them, or as if they weren't even out. And that's nice to see.
Yeah, I mean, Knies, he is fulfilling the promise that I thought I saw a couple years ago when he was playing with the University of Minnesota and with the U.S. Olympic team. He's a big body kid. The only concern I have right now is that he has been dinged up a couple times, whether it's shoulder or concussion or knee. But he's going to go to those dirty areas. He's going to take some abuse. He's a big, strong kid. And he plays well with Matthews and Marner. So they found themselves a top 6 winger, Matthew Knies. Right now, I think the concern is, Tavares is back. Tavares and Nylander work. Who fits in on that left wing on that second line? Is it Bobby McMahon, who's had a good year? Does that where Calle Jarnkrok slots in? Do they move Max Domi there if they get a center? So, all these, it's a domino effect. They add one player, everybody moves up. They add somebody who's been unavailable all year, like Jarnkrok, who's a good, solid veteran player. Then he helps them along. He helps their penalty kill. Guys like Pontus Holmberg and Connor Dewar, they can contribute. So all these players have their part. But I think that this team, if you have aspirations for them to advance, win the division, advance 2 or 3 rounds, go to the Stanley Cup final, there's something more needed. And they know, and I think they know it.
Bobby McMahon, big boy, 15 goals. We talk about Knies reaching 30. McMahon's going to reach 20, maybe 22, 23, 24, 25. It's found money, Mike. This is terrific. The Four Nations event's coming up in the next week and a half. Funny, watching the game last night, and there was a promotion for it. My wife asked me, "Are you going to watch that?" And we've made it known, Mike, that neither of us have much time for these frivolous events. But my answer was yes. Because do I want to see Marner and Crosby and all the great Canadian players playing together? Do I want to see Matthews captaining the American team? I'd watch for 5 minutes, and if the product looks great, I don't know if I'll invest too much emotion into it. But as a hockey fan, effervescent hockey is always pleasant for the eyes. Gary K, do you guys believe that the compressed schedule due to the Four Nations event is watering down the product? I believe there should be a worry about player fatigue and injury from the league.
Not watering down the product, but I think it's contributed to the injuries. I think, you've got these schedules where, teams are playing 4 games in 8 nights, and, it's a day off in between, no time for practice. Players get more injured when they're worn down. And I think that's, been, and get used to it, because next year with the Olympics, there's going to be a 2-week break as well. So this 4 nations schedule is essentially what you're going to see next year. So, I mean, I just get used to it, because it's the norm.
Mike, you've got to cover the Sabres today. I know you joyfully do that, but
oh yes,
when there's a monetary reward involved, hey, by any means necessary. Anything else you want to add before we wrap up?
Just the I think that I've picked up on a little bit of negativity when it comes to this team. I think, there's a lot of people out there right now that is essentially saying, why haven't they made the move? Why haven't they done something? With their cap situation, they may have to wait right until the very end. Some of these other teams had the benefits, like Dallas had the benefit of Tyler Seguin on long-term injury. So they have $9.5 million in cap space that they can work with, because he's not going to come back to the playoffs. And that's why they can add Michael Granlund, who I think was making $5 million or something like that, and Cody Ceci, who you can have them, believe me. So, they're limited in some of the moves that they can make. And I know, and we talked about it last week, the Rantanen deal, all of a sudden everybody's like, whoa, what if the Leafs trade Mitch Marner? It's not happening. He's got a no-move clause.
How would trading Mitch Marner? How would trading Mitch Marner, the 5th leading scorer in the league, who drives the offense and has been there from day one of this season, along with William Nylander, how would trading him advance this team's prospects of winning a championship this year? That makes 0 sense.
Well, it's the fact. I mean, okay, and the calculation is different from the off season till now. That's why it was basically, okay, if you're going to trade Mitch Marner, you trade him in the summer,
right?
You not force him, but you say, we're not going to sign you. If you want to go someplace and get the 8-year deal, we'll trade you. We'll make the best deal we can. They decided not to do that. In season, he's got a no-move clause, so he's not going to go anywhere. And you're not going to upset the apple cart. If the team was struggling like Vancouver is struggling, then you understand why they trade JT Miller. This team is not struggling. They're not trading Mitch Marner, so that's
right.
not.
Mike, just real quick, we're wondering how the Leafs can get a 3rd-line center who could score and be physical, and a little more defensive help to help move this team forward. But there are people who are okay with moving the 5th leading scorer in the league and a guy who's on pace for 120 points, who drives this offense and plays tons of minutes. So it's okay to remove him from the team, but you need that 3rd-line center, and get out of here, man. That's just, again, the personal animosity towards this guy has to be set aside. We're all in this together towards the end. If he asks for too much, Mike, and it's beyond what the Leafs can pay for a winger, I'm all for it. But moving Mitch Marner for what pieces back who are got to integrate now and make this team better? It's absolutely bizarre. It really is. I don't know, Mike. Anything else, and then we'll get out of here.
No, I'm good.
Yeah, you are good. Enjoy the Sabres game. We will hopefully reconvene sometime within the next week. If not for the Sunday Spectacular, the Leafs playing late. Maybe we sneak in a show before one of the late games, and maybe an update on what the Leafs may or may not do when it comes to making an acquisition with the trade deadline looming. Mike, thanks for everything. And you know what? R.I.P. Bills. What a shitty way for those guys to go out. Were you surprised by that?
No, I said
the officiating.
No, I said last week they were going to lose. I said to myself they're going to lose painfully, because that's just what happens. And the NHL, the NFL should be ashamed of themselves with their shoddy officiating, and I'm not going to watch the Super Bowl because I already know what's going to. I hope the Eagles run over them, but the Chiefs will win because I am convinced that the NFL wants the Chiefs to win, and they get favorable calls, and I get it. But I can't deal with it.
How do you think that message gets to the officials? Like, is it unspoken?
Yeah,
That if it gets that close.
I don't think it's a fix. I'm not that conspiratorial minded, but I do think good teams get the good calls, and especially when that good team is playing at home and you have the fans on them. It's tough. Those are tough things to overcome. But I just I don't have any patience for it. This is a team that has screwed themselves with 13 seconds and now got screwed by the league. And nobody wants to say it. Nobody wants to make excuses, but I'm sorry. I think they got jobbed.
All right, guys, the Leafs continue their West Coast swing. I will continue to advocate for this project that is the Leafs Convo. When you like our content and subscribe to the channel, you help us grow. We've been, the little show that could over the last 6, 7, 8 years, dating back, I don't know, over 10 since Mike and I first started collabing. You do come to us. You're religious about, your usage of our content. If you could like the content, subscribe to the channel, share what we do, get into our Convo shorts, pass those along. Just help us grow a little bit more so we can keep going forward. And that always looks great in the eyes of our sponsors because we don't ask for a penny from you, but the sponsorship does help us in the end. Thanks for being here. For Mr. Augello in Cheektowaga, New York, I'm Norm James in London, Ontario. The Leafs Convo for Oak Ridge Ford is out.